For all the first-party games we get on the Nintendo Switch's online service that are actually great, the above-average-sized end loves to throw the most random nothing-happening games at us out of nowhere every now and then. But as frustrating as it may be to get games like Jelly Boy when all anybody's really asking for is Bebe's Kids, there's actually a perfectly logical explanation for all this, and if you give me like 48 hours, I'll tell you why, and have time to spare.
Take the cruise and find the where's and why's and who. Cameron, all one word. Cameron, Cameron.
Alright, so right off the bat, let me clarify that I'm not saying any of these games are necessarily bad, but when you look at all the iconic NES, Super Nintendo, and 64 games that are being neglected in favor of these randos, then it can be pretty annoying.
Man, what the hell?
Personally, I've always had a bit of a soft spot for Journey to Silius, so I do like the idea of getting games that nobody asked for, because if it all just comes with the service anyway, then it does give a lot of hidden gems a chance of finally being seen and appreciated by more people than just me and my landlord Gunther. But even so, is there really a good reason why we got Scat before Conker's Bad Fur Day? I know, Nintendo's a family-friendly company, and they might not want to have their kiddies traumatized after seeing The Great Mighty Pooh. But do you go have your kids Google Scat and tell me what's worse for their fragile little minds? Hell, I'm surprised YouTube doesn't flag any videos talking about this game, but to be 100% fair though, Nintendo's first-party games are kind of the main selling points to all their consoles. For the most part, we really do have the majority of the best games at the time of this recording, and once we finally got Earthbound and Star Fox 2, it seems like the days of people rioting in the streets over forgotten third-party games being an entire update are, well, kinda long gone.
That's more like it. Like that? I do, yeah. What you looking at, man? Shit.
But as for why we haven't gotten all of Nintendo's greatest first-party games ever made, though, I think most of it's got to do with pacing more than anything else, which some people may not agree with, but honestly, I kinda get it. You can say this about pretty much any successful console, but if you went all the way back to the 80s and released the NES alongside every game the console ever had all on day one and never anything else after that, then do you really think the console would have been as successful as it was with the library sprinkled out over time? Granted, it'd probably had a much better first or possibly even second year and still have been an overall success, but what likely would have happened is that people would have played whatever they were going to play in the first year, possibly two, and then just kind of move on with their lives. Nobody'd have played all the best games in the library, they'd have just played whatever they got around to and then started playing baseball or something, because after 2 years, most people would have viewed the entire library as old news. Sure, it wouldn't have been the exact same thing to put every retro Nintendo game on the Switch's online service on day one, since most people are only paying for the service to play Smash or Mario Kart online, as opposed to paying full retail price for each game, but still though, people do tend to be less interested in things they perceive to be old news, so I'd be willing to bet that more people played Earthbound when it had the spotlight all to itself, rather than if it had just been one of 100 games on day one. However, just because Nintendo's pacing themselves with their first-party games, though, doesn't mean that they're gonna release all their games at some point, because I'm pretty sure they're consciously holding a few of their classics back just because they don't want anybody to play them. I already made an entire video about the problems of Smash 64 coming to the Switch, and I guess you could toss Melee in there as well, but the gist is basically that I think Nintendo would prefer to keep the Smash community playing on the Switch with the current game that Uncle Saki damn near died for. Although we do have 2 old Mario Kart games on the Switch, so I'm not saying it's impossible or anything like that, just a little less likely is all. Then we got games like Animal Crossing, which pretty much fall into the same category as Smash Bros. Being a once-per-console type of deal, but since the GameCube version of the first game lets you play NES games, I'd imagine that Nintendo would have a little less incentive to re-release it. Then again, since all these NES games are already on the online service anyway, maybe they don't really care about that anymore. Nintendo doesn't care about that, though, then it'd be pretty cool to get a version of Smash Wii U someday that actually lets you play the NES preview ROMs that are on there without any time limits, and if that's not the biggest first-world problem, then I don't know what is. Then there's games like Pokemon Stadium that are just plain out of date, not to mention the fact that the Pokemon franchise could be a little bit of a weirdo when it comes to re-releasing their older games, and when it comes to games like GoldenEye, Nintendo's just not gonna deal with the licensing issues and headaches that come with it. You gotta admit, it would be pretty cool if they palette swapped New Ghostbusters 2 and turned it into something like a Luigi's Mansion game. As with the third-party titles, though, you'd think that if the above-average-sized end is gonna go out of their way to pay money for games that can't be driving even one subscription to the service, then they should at least get the good ones, right? While we're at it, what's the deal with all these caveman games, Nintendo? What are you, Geico? Well, I think it's pretty obvious that whatever Nintendo's paying for these games probably isn't very much, considering that most third-party developers would rather sell their retro games and compilations on the eShop rather than whoring them out to Nintendo to force us to rent them just so we can play Smash Online, but then again, sometimes games like Crystalis end up doing both. But as for why the below-oversized end's not paying all that much, though, the budget's probably not all that good to begin with, seeing as how they're only charging $20 to $50 per year, which is considerably less than what Sony and Microsoft are charging for their services. You'd think that Nintendo would at least improve their capabilities for online gameplay, seeing as how this is the one real reason people are actually paying for the upgrade, but while it is pretty nice to get Mario Kart and Animal Crossing DLC, I don't really think the retro games are really worth paying all this money on their own. Don't get me wrong, it's certainly better than nothing and does soften the blow, but I refuse to believe that anyone's paying for any of these obscure third-party games, so I just don't really get why Nintendo's bothering with them unless they're, like, dirt cheap. Sometimes I wonder if they just straight up bought the rights to some of these games permanently. I mean, I don't even know who owns the rights to them in the modern day anyway, and I'm sure half of those people don't even know they own the rights to these IPs either. Man, if Nintendo knocked on my door and wanted to buy the rights to Bible games that I unknowingly inherited from my Uncle Eddie 15 years ago after he died smoking cigarettes with nicotine patches on, I don't think I'd try to negotiate, you know? I just feel lucky that somebody wanted to buy the rights to my random game that nobody remembered, and I'd assume that nobody'd ever make me an offer again. Although I can't say that I'd do the same thing if I owned the rights to something better, like, at the risk of dating this video, a game like Little Samson. And if you're watching this in the future where Little Samson actually ended up coming to the Switch, then just pretend I said some other game, or, you know, you could just say Aged Milk in the comments if that makes you feel any better. As for all the obscure gems that are actually amazing, though, I'd hope that the reason they're not on the Switch yet is because Nintendo's lowballing them as opposed to the original rights holders being butt wagons about it, because there really are a ton of hidden gems that'd be awesome to bring to the Switch, but instead, we'll probably just keep getting games like Eliminator Boat Duel and Chevy Chase's Tax Simulator 2 and things of that nature. Oh well, I guess it's better than more scat, but at any rate though, that's all for today. If you got a kick out of my incoherent rambling and disturbing imagery though, then you should check out this video I made on fan-translated games, but if you'll excuse me though, I gotta go sell a bag of CPAP machines to this sketchy dude on Craigslist, cause eBay doesn't like it when I sell CPAP machines. Later!